Good afternoon and welcome to the 14th Regulators and Policymakers Retreat being organized by IPAI here at Goa. I have the pleasure of introducing to you in the IPAI studio Mr. Shivanand Nimbargi, MD and CEO of Green Infra. Welcome to the retreat and to the IPAI studio, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Nimbargi, the fact that Green Infra has done a lot of work, human work in fact, in setting up renewable energy power plants, especially wind power plants in various parts of the country, and you're one of the largest wind IPPs in the country, so to say. What are the challenges that you as a wind developer face?
I think just to go a little touch, we are a renewable island, so we also do other forms of energy, solar, hydro, as well as that. We've not been able to add much capacity on biomass and hydro essentially because of issues related to development and certain issues related to the policy side. But other than that, on wind we have really expanded quite well, and also on solar. So we collectively operate about 325 across 7 states now. The policies have been quite encouraging, but at the same time, what is important is the enforcement and implementation of those things, and a recognition that renewable power is something which needs to be promoted and continue to grow as an energy security issue also for the country. So to that extent, I think it needs to get the required priority, and policy issues need to be addressed accordingly so that the sector can get additional investment. And some of the steps that we have seen of late have not really encouraged the investors. The RPO renewable power obligation and the REC pricing should have, and the volume should have picked up because the enforcement is not there. So the volumes are lying untraded. So that puts a lot of stress on the investors.
Great. So for the benefit of viewers, what we're trying to say here is that every state is mandated to pick up a certain percentage of its power through renewable sources.
Yes.
It may vary from 5% to 7% to 10% as the case may be. But states are not really doing it because there's no penalty on them to actually pick up the renewable power, which is why the renewable market is not picking up. Is that correct?
Absolutely right. That's what is there. So I think all states have to necessarily commit to a renewable power obligation. The renewable power obligation is both non-solar and solar, and that they are committed. Idea is to reach about 15 to 20% of the obligation by 2020. That's what is the general government guideline. So in that respect, every year they need to keep on increasing till that level is reached. But since there is no enforcement, there are no penalties or even incentives for that matter for them to comply. So the compliance levels are extremely low.
One thing that DISCOMs routinely tell us is, look, we are in such bad shape, we have to provide below cost power to our agricultural or our domestic consumers, etc. How do we purchase this expensive renewable energy? So how do we go about
One of the areas that DISCOMs need to focus on is their own technical losses, which have been improving, but still there is a huge scope of improvement on the technical losses. And if those technical losses were to be controlled, that would bring in a lot of revenue for them, which is currently not generating the revenue, because what gets into the system and what gets billed, so large chunk of it goes as a technical loss. So that's one area of which can clearly get plugged by the DISCOMs, which can directly improve their top line. That's number one. And number two is, I think today we have various forms of energy in the country. So it's a question of how do we mix and match the various forms of energy and then be able to take it from there. Today DISCOMs have an accumulated historical losses that have been there. There's a scheme that's come out from the center now in terms of restructuring them. There's a 50% that DISCOM has to take, and the 50% needs to come in from the government side. With that, at least they can get to a clean slate, and then, with the improvement in the technical losses, I guess it should work. And at the same time, world over, if you see, renewable power have been supported with schemes because technologies and everything have got to mature and volumes have to come for the prices to come down. But systematically, we have seen prices coming down, and that would continue. But one thing what we forget when the tariffs of renewable is compared is this tariff is something which remains firm, because unlike in a coal or gas, which is going to be linked to the pricing of coal and gas, it's going to keep varying. So in a conventional power, you have two parts, the There's a fixed part, there's a variable part. Whereas when the regulator sets the tariff for wind or solar, it's fixed for life. So 10 years down the line, the PPA that is currently signed at whatever tariff is going to remain the same, whereas coal price will not be the same. The coal generator obviously will be getting a much higher price. There needs to be a comparison.
One of the perceptions is that, and probably rightly so, is that wind power is getting cheaper by the day and coal power is getting more expensive by the day, and both of them are more or less within a 1 rupee, 2 rupee range right now. Wind power may be 2 rupees per unit more costlier than say coal, and maybe foreseeable 2-3 years it might be comparable to the cost of coal power. Do you think that will really revolutionize the wind power sector?
Yeah, I mean it would definitely, and with more support. I mean we are still waiting for the government to announce the GBI implementation, which has been held up for almost 6 months now. So that's actually again very important for further investments to happen. And on the technology side, earlier the turbines used to be at 50 meters, 60 meters. Now we are talking about having turbines 100 meters and above. So what that means is that even where the wind resource is less, you can still install a turbine and have much better PLF. So the generation capability or the energy yield per turbine is moving up, right? And there is of course an incremental cost to that technology, but then it gets basically offset by the increase in yield, and that helps you to bring down the cost of the power as you move along. But till that time, the sector needs all those incentives and supports which can really help in more investment, because what we have tapped today is hardly anything compared to the potential that is existing in the country. Easily potential is about 120,000-130,000 megawatts. So that's the kind of potential. So some support, investors are willing to invest, I don't think. And again, most of the things is as per the guidelines laid down by CERC itself. It's that they expect certain calculations to be done in a certain way, and then the returns are there.
One of the things that we've also seen is that in the recent past, for solar power, the government came out with a pretty ambitious and very practical scheme where NTPC would have a separate arm in VVNL which would purchase solar energy, pool it together with their own cheap coal-fired power, and then sell it to the DISCOMs to make this power more palatable to DISCOMs' financial appetite. Don't you think we can do the same thing in the wind power sector?
Yes, it can be, but again, I mean, pooling of course is possible, and agencies like NTPC who have the conventional this thing, they can do that. But now even again what is happening is I think the next round of solar mission, I think it's coming now under the Solar Energy Corporation, and with a different set of bidding norms, as you must have seen, that's there on the website now. So it is moving away from that concept and talking about a new concept of viability gap funding. So again, I think the first bids of NVVN were pretty good on solar. That should have been continued that way, but there's a change. So let's see how that evolves.
Is it possible now that a pooled pricing mechanism can be used for, say, the new thermal capacity that are coming up, and pooling that power with green power to sell it to the DISCOMs? Do you think that is an option that can be done?
Yeah, I mean, as long as its question is there's a cost of generation for each of these resources. There's a cost of power for different things. So it's the ability of the concerned state and the DISCOMs how they would like to put it and how the cost should be passed on to the various consumers. But it's also a matter of fact that power is something where people will have to pay for what is consumed,
Right.
and that's very important. And also a large chunk of focus needs to be on the transmission technical losses, so-called, so that the metering should start right from the generation up to the consumer, so that you are systematically able to track where the losses are and able to plug them. So that is when whole efficiency comes in, and the overall cost of power can come down. So APPC, this average pool pricing mechanism, is already there in the states as it is given. That has linked to an REC benefit, but unfortunately that is not availed by anyone because REC are not getting traded, and at the same time there is no visibility of the REC beyond 2017, because the current policy declaration is only until 2017, and these are long cycle projects. So when lenders give the money, typically lends you for about 10 to 12 years. So they look for a long-term visibility of cash flow. So those are the basic issues. So I agree with you that they need to look at various mechanisms under which generators are taken care and consumer interests are also protected.
You have a fair amount of generation in Tamil Nadu and other South Indian states where you are asked to back down generation. Why? Because wind power is coming on at night when too many consumers are really buying power. So they ask you to back it down instead of selling it across India where there would have been demand. What do you think is the way out?
I think there is a connectivity of power grid that's likely to come up in the next year or two, I guess. So that will then enable. At the same time, I think there is, I believe, an industrial load production there. If they are able to arrange power there and consume this, so that can help us to mitigate the current situation, because this post backing is essentially because of the high frequency. Whenever the grid hits 50.2, then you are asked to back down, and the conventional load or hydro load is absorbed. Wind is the sector which is getting strongly affected. There has been representations made by the associations in Tamil Nadu. Now let's hope we get some relief.
Sure. Looking at the solar market now, how do we incentivize the solar market, which was supposed to be the poor cousin of the wind power market, and now that the industry is going through a recessionary phase the past year and a half, what is the way of getting out of this recession and ensuring the renewables grow well in India?
See, I think the country first needs to look from a energy security perspective, because the biggest advantage in promoting renewable is that you are going to make the country independent and you have energy security within your own means. At the same time, as these capacities increase, foreign exchange or any of those things are not there, and this is escalation proof. Because it's your own resource, you don't have to pay anything for that. So that becomes to that extent more attractive. And then promoting both wind and solar has distinct advantages, because solar typically works from 10 to 4 and wind after 4 kicks on. So on a blended basis of wind and solar, if you look at, you can get a much higher availability of power. So there would of course be certain gaps, so that can be taken care by the conventional sources. So from that perspective, both are necessary and they can go. Coming back to your question on the solar, the Gujarat was a success and they were able to get about 900 megawatts. Then you had NVV and batch 1 and batch 2 successfully put out, all projects commissioned and going. But unfortunately, what has happened post that is that some of the people who have been bidding have bid out very aggressive tariffs. If you look at the biddings in Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, have been so aggressive that people are now not able to find means to finance and develop those projects. The PPAs are not signed, no investment has happened. So anything, people who are serious long-term players and who are committing a lot of money, investors like us, look for a long-term stability. We are not here to build a plant and then sell to someone and then go away. No, we are here, our business is to generate and supply clean power on a long-term sustained basis, contributing to the community where we operate. But here you have people who do speculative bidding, who do bidding with cheap imported materials and offer tariffs. So there has to be some mechanism within the bidding process such, bids are not taken or qualifying requirements should be so stiff that you don't get people who are not serious investors. And that's what is really affecting. And our worry is that if it continues in the same direction, sorry to say that investments in solar will start drying up.
One of the exciting areas that we just discussed was offshore-based power plant,
Yeah.
wind power plant. Can you let us know how feasible that is and whether it's economical enough to start off?
As far as the technology goes, it's proven worldwide, and a lot of development, a lot of projects actually are happening. Capacity is getting added as we speak in Europe and other places. So that is something proven technology-wise, implemented. It's going to be expensive, but at the same time we need to assess. So there are certain preliminary studies which have been started by CWET under the Ministry of Renewable Energy. So we need to get certain results on that. But one of the challenging part would be on the transmission side again there, because most of these would come on the remote coastal areas. So then you need to invest into the transmission lines. And at the same time, getting approvals and clearances is going to be quite a challenging task. So this is something which we have highlighted to the ministry also, because on the coast you will have variety of agencies of government bodies having varieties of controls over them. So how do you really go ahead in terms of getting all those approvals? It's going to be quite challenging. So that also is put on the issue of the task force. So another 2 or 3 years, I think we should start seeing investments happening in offshore.
What would be your wish list for regulators and policymakers in the country to improve the renewable energy scenario?
I think first is get the RPO enforced, give visibility beyond 2017, give renewable power the status of must run, and ensure the transmission planning is done considering renewable power. Today most of the stress that comes in to the system is because renewable power is not considered as part of the transmission plan. So that is one of the reasons why we are back on first. So instead of that, it should be a must-run status, and transmission, of course, RPO enforcement. If that's done, I guess all issues will get addressed. Of course, regulators need to ensure that the tariffs are in line with the market conditions, because investors look for returns. CRC has certain guidelines on returns. So as long as tariffs are within those lines, a lot of investment.
Nimbargi, thank you so much for joining us at the PI studio or the PI retreat. We hope you have a wonderful time here, sir.
Good, thank you, and all the best.
Thank you.